Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. And so in today's video, we won't be really going over the short range or what's happening right now. We'll be focusing on a storm system that is looking to be impacting the United States quite some time out, not really in the long range, definitely more in the medium range. So, I don't like looking at storms that are super far out, but this one definitely could be a impactful one. Probably the largest one, maybe not the most severe, right? Just because it's large doesn't mean it's powerful, but it could be widespread and large scale, similar to what you would see during the fall. And these systems now will start getting more big. They will be having more power. This one maybe not too powerful, but we'll have to see. Definitely indication that the characteristics of these storm systems are starting to change. We're going from a kind of a summer-like pattern into, well, almost a early fall at this point. August, mid-August, still a bit away, but weather doesn't really play by exact dates. It could be a little bit ahead or behind schedule, but yeah, regardless, we'll be talking about that. And this storm system definitely could be producing rain, severe weather, not really snow, no snow yet, right? Probably another 1 or 2 months at least before we start talking about that. But before we get into this, if you guys would like to support this channel, obviously watch the video first, see if you enjoy this channel. Don't subscribe for no reason, and if you do, subscribe, and you could also like the video. Comments or concerns down below, please leave them. I answer most of them, so if you have any, please feel free to leave them down below. Okay, let's start talking about this. So first off, I actually don't want to start off with the European. I want to start off with the GFS. Now, here's the thing. This storm system, there's some models like the European that show it in a very powerful fashion, not also large and powerful. Probably the most aggressive, the European, which usually if you're into the weather, you know that the European is, well, a bit more reasonable usually compared to some other models. So that's definitely interesting that it's showing the storm system at its full strength, or much more strength than what the GFS shows. And they all disagree slightly on a timing and exact orientation of the system. But again, this isn't in the next 60, 70 hours. All the stuff that's going on, I'm kind of ignoring. This will be mainly to do with the tropics and the remnants of this last system. But my goodness, it was definitely a heck of a storm. Dropped a lot of rain across much of Wisconsin, portions of Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio. Now it's causing severe weather across the Northeast, and it will continue to do so into today and tomorrow. Okay, moving forward, there's obviously Tropical Storm Fred could be impacting Florida. Lots of moisture to do with that. But here's where things get interesting. Notice we get a little piece of energy off the coast of Canada, really moving in at this point onto British Columbia. This is August 16th, Monday, so next week. And notice that as we push this forward, we see a lot of more activity starting to develop. We have the monsoons, right? But it's also way more to the north with that precipitation. Again, monsoons usually don't go that far to the north, and that's because, well, this is a separate kind of system combining with the help of that moisture, a lot of rain across Montana, North Dakota, potentially southern Canada. So this is now, at this point, late Tuesday into early Wednesday. As we push this forward into time, notice what we start seeing Wednesday and into Thursday. We see quite a bit of orientation of rain, showers, storms. Definitely a conglomerate of large precipitation as we pushes into Wednesday and Thursday. Compared to the south, or the storms we've been seeing so far this summer, they have been kind of disorganized. Right now, this one you can see it does weaken and it just develops into this weak cold front. But that's the GFS, and you can see it develops at around hour 130, 40, 50. But it has a second wave, which let me tell you right now, the European doesn't do this with the kind of the two waves thing. It keeps it in one conglomerate strong storm system, while the Canadian does a similar thing to the GFS, but again, slightly different. They're all different. But look at that. Another strong wave of rain, showers, storms, very large. You can see into Minnesota, North Dakota. Sorry, more of South Dakota, southeastern North Dakota, Nebraska. This is now at this point almost into Saturday of 2 weeks out, almost, not quite. Yeah, and then you can see that kind of moves along, develops into an outstretched cold front, and we see then our attention turns towards this potential hurricane right there, which the GFS shows, which again is very far out. So again, nothing to panic about quite yet. And even once it does come, we don't panic about that stuff because it's not good. Let's focus our attention back onto the storm system that we're talking about, and I want to take a glance at what the rains from this storm system could do. So let's go to our 246. That's really when the impacts of those two waves will be pretty much over. A lot of this isn't to do with that storm system we're kind of focusing on. That's tropical moisture, tropical storm Fred, maybe a few more systems impacting, as you saw. This is the monsoons, but that definitely you could see feeds into the rain across southern Canada, North Dakota, South Dakota. Not everyone will be seeing rain, but the areas that do, there could be quite a bit, especially with that second wave. You could see there are some pockets of up to 2 to 5 inches of rain, much needed across these locations. Definitely something they can they will use. Now let's take a glance at the Canadians. So this was just one model. In the weather world, you want to look at many models so that you have a good idea of what's going on. It's kind of looking at one news source that's extremely biased, potentially, right? That's like one weather model. You're not really going to get the best handle on this. In order to get a good view of what's going on, you got to look across many different sources, many different sites, and that's kind of the weather models and their different features, right? So look at that cold front. Again, that's the current storm we have going on. That drags on. It's in its finishing phases, thankfully, but again, it will start getting more active from the south with the tropical moisture and the monsoon, so the Canadian does agree with that. And then look, we see that wave move in from British Columbia into more of Montana, the northwest, upper plains, and by Tuesday, the Canadian, or the GFS at this point, was developing that first wave. And you can see the Canadian does that pretty congruently, actually, very congruently at the very similar time frame, also very similar feature. Quite a bit of rain into Minnesota, again, Nebraska, Iowa, and that does weaken into a cold front. So there is some agreement amongst these models. Definitely, that's a good thing. But look what we see here. You remember how the the GFS developed two systems, two waves? So does the Canadian, and it does so in a similar fashion, but here's the difference. The Canadian is much more slower with this, with its second wave. Notice there's some snow across British Columbia, the mountains. Again, that is a sign that winter is, eventually going to come. Maybe not yet, right? There's still a lot of heat to deal with. But look at that. The low pressure starts evolving, and the Canadian starts evolving a strong low pressure system across Montana, southern Canada, into North Dakota, Minnesota. A classic system that is associated with more of a fall-like pattern. And again, this is way further, this is a bit more delayed than the second wave of the GFS. It's much stronger, but it is in a similar fashion, the two models, that they both show two separate waves. And you may be wondering, okay, well, they're two separate waves then. It's not that easy. The European just shows it in one phase, right? And the Canadian GFS and European are kind of like the holy trinity of models. They are pretty much some of the best ones that go out to medium and into the long range. So when you have all three agreeing on something, that's usually a good sign, right? That means you're confident. If you have all of them disagreeing on nothing, or on everything, then that's a bad sign. You have no confidence at all. And in this case, we have two models, the GFS and Canadian, that agree for the most part, but we have the European that disagrees with them. Now, see, if the GFS and European were agreeing and the Canadian wasn't agreeing, then I would say, okay, probably the Canadian's just a bit loopy. However, that's very hard to say for the European, because the European usually is a very good, precise, accurate model. I would say probably better than the GFS and Canadian out of all three of them. So when it disagrees with the other two, it's not as easy to just kind of, cast it under the loopy category. So let's take a look at what the European model has to say. Again, it's going to be pretty vastly different. Again, for the most part, though, in the short range, it's similar. The cold front pushes out, right? We have that low pressure across, the tropical storm, eventually, tropical depression, Fred, tropical storm, eventually, that will, again, produce precip across the south, the monsoons. So we're agreeing with that. Everything is good. And this is where things start differentiating. Notice, the European starts developing the first wave at around the same time that the GFS does with the Canadian. You can see there's our energy from the northwest combined with the southwest flow from the tropics. And look, there we go, right there, into Wednesday, almost exactly when the Canadian and GFS developed their systems across very similar locations. Manitoba, right? Saskatchewan, North Dakota. And look, it's a large fetch of precipitation. That's very, very impressive for late summer. And as he pushes forward, notice, if you recall, that the GFS and the Canadian, they weaken this cold front, right? This storm. They just kind of dissipate it, and they start formulating a second system. Well, look at that European. It starts formulating a large system right there. Look at that. It turns vertical, and it doesn't weaken it at all. Look at that. It starts turning To the north, we see strong winds, strengthening of the low pressure, and boom, almost like a winter storm. It kind of sends itself to the north. We have a cold front, a warm front. If this was a winter storm, you already know that this side would be all snow, but unfortunately, or I should say, fortunately, it's not cold enough for that yet. But look at that; that definitely evolves into a classic kind of strong storm system, and it brings in much more cooler air than the Canadian or the GFS does because, well, it's a strong system, has much more power, and yeah, the temperature anomaly behind this is definitely going to have some cool air versus the Canadian and GFS at this time frame do show a bit of cold air. It's less organized and doesn't reach as far into the United States. So yeah, you can see that's a pretty large difference from just a few models that I showed you. And obviously it would bring a lot of precip to the north. Look at that, North Dakota, 2, 4, 5 inches, right? The monsoon's going strong as well. This would be in part to do with that system up here and a bit from the tropics. You can see Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma seeing decent amounts. Southeast, mainly the tropics, getting impacted by that. But then look right here into southern Canada. We have some locations in a 6-7 inch range potentially, and again, a lot of wind would be out of that system if it were to develop that strongly. And that could potentially trigger a pattern change, maybe more cold shots, maybe more strong low pressures after this big one. It's hard to tell, and a lot of this is a bit speculation, but we do have some confidence that there is gonna be something occurring. You can see the Canadian also shows a lot of precipitation right here, maybe not as organized as what the European shows, but it's there, meaning that some sort of storm system is forming. And I mean, the disagreement is just really what interests me with the Canadian and the European. Look, the Canadian, right? It shows this large low pressure here. I already showed you this, by the way. This isn't new, but I'm just kind of trying to paint this for you guys a bit better. So look, there's that low pressure, right? This is our 240, and this is strong. It's big, and if you're to take a look at the European, there's nothing here. I mean, it's not even a weakened version of it, a stronger version of it. It just does a completely different thing with that first wave, and it strengthens it, it amplifies it, and that's why it doesn't form that second system. Now, perhaps, I would say that at this point, maybe the European will, in the next model, weaken this, and then maybe develop that system that the Canadian is forming, or maybe the Canadian and GFS will start trending towards what the European model is showing. I mean, you could see that the one from midnight yesterday didn't really show a system like that. I mean, it did show precipitation and activity across the northern plains and southern Canada, and you can see there's our storm, right? And it weakened it similarly to what the GFS did, though it did keep it a bit stronger. Now that I look at that, yeah, that's still an impressive storm to say the least. It just sped it up with this last model run from the newer one. Noticed that it was still around at 240, so it slowed its progress. But yeah, definitely a more impressive system from the European, and probably a bit more consistent. So at this point, I would say that it's definitely not out of the question to what the European is showing that happens. Notice the Canadian from 12 hours ago, so this is the older model run. It did show a system, again, a pretty strong one across the northern plains, and it did intensify it right there. Look at that, similar to what the European did, and but it still did show a potential new storm forming. So really, both models have been consistent, but there has been a lot of changing. We'll have to wait and see. This is kind of exciting, guys. Obviously, this isn't going to be a snowstorm, but potentially, a good chunk of the U.S. could be seeing severe weather. A good portion of the southern Canadian area could be seeing rain, which is what they need. They've been in a very, very bad drought. And of course, behind that, there is obviously, sorry about that, obviously, if there is strong enough of a system, there's going to be a lot of cool air for everyone to be benefiting from. And, these last few days, especially across the Midwest and the Great Lakes, have been really hot, humid, moist. So that will be nice, that cool down. But, it's definitely it's going to be beneficial not only across the upper Midwest and Great Lakes. There's going to be rains for potentially the Northwest, upper plains, and they need that even more than the cool air across the Great Lakes, right? They desperately need that. So yeah, a lot of things, a lot of details. Obviously, no short range model is updating us on that yet. It's way too far out. I do want to show you a few models and what they show with this current short-term severe weather. So yeah, that's pretty much it for today's video on the long, the big storm. But I do want to take 1 or 2 more minutes to focus on the severe weather in the short range today. This is what one model shows. It really doesn't do a good performance of what's actually going on. So let me choose a different one. See, that's how you usually tell whether or not a model has a good handle on it. You just see what's going on the radar. I didn't show you it, but there's a lot more activity than what that model showed you. Her model has a better handle on it. So notice what they show, right? Quite a bit of storms and showers into Indiana, Illinois. The Northeast is a bit more active than what this model shows as well. Again, very hard to predict this environment. Notice what it does show, a redevelopment of quite a bit of storms across Missouri, Illinois, Kansas, Nebraska, and into Indiana. Again, gradually a bit more to the south than previous days. I would say, though, that there are some signs that this could be a bit further towards the north, but it could equally be even a bit further to the south. Again, the confidence on that is rather low. And notice that it does bring a bit of activity into Ohio tomorrow, into the Northeast, and into even portions of southeastern Canada for my folks, viewers right there. Into Saturday and during the overnight hours, and then it kind of dwindles itself out, but definitely a bit more severe weather potentially on Saturday, but you know, and then finally the cold front shoves itself out of existence. But then we start focusing on look what's going right there across Florida. That's the beginnings of the showings from Tropical Storm Fred, which again at this point is a bit also uncertain whether or not it will be hurricane, a tropical storm, or where it will go. If it goes right on Florida after it reaches from the Caribbean, it will be weaker and probably not even a storm. But if it takes more of a western track, which again the models now are starting to indicate that, I've been watching the news and they're saying that the cone is starting to shift towards the west. If that does occur into Panama, into I just said Panama. I meant to say Pensacola, and into portions of Alabama, it has much more time here to intensify into potentially a stronger tropical storm or a weak hurricane. Nothing major at this point, not a major hurricane, but it doesn't have to be major to great impacts. All right, that's basically it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you all on the next episode. See ya. Bye.